The spotlight blazed down on 5,000 crystals, sewn into Selena Vance's designer gown, each one worth more than most people's monthly rent. The pop diva's voice echoed through the empty concert hall as she rehearsed for tonight's VIP gala in the shadows. By the stage, Marco gripped his mop with calloused hands. His work boots had holes that let in the cold. His uniform reeked of disinfectant, and broken dreams shatter the glass. Selena's latest hit filled the air when Crash Marco accidentally knocked over his water bucket. The sound cut through her performance like a knife. Selena stopped mid-note. She didn't yell. Instead, she smiled into the microphone, making sure everyone in the building could hear her words. "Hey there, Mr. Disinfectant Smell. Do you think your bucket makes better music than my $1,000,000 voice? Clean that mess up and stop breathing so loud. You're polluting my air." Marco bent down to clean the spill, his face burning with shame. But his ears, the same ears that once made him a rising star, caught something the audience couldn't hear, something wrong. As Selena hit the high C6 note, Marco noticed the vibrato was too flat, too perfect, too mechanical. He muttered under his breath, "She's using live pitch correction. That note should be 1046 hertz, but she's only hitting 980. The software is pulling it up off." Years of classical training had given him perfect pitch. He could hear the digital fingerprints in her voice like a lie detector. Every note was being auto-tuned in real time. Selena caught him shaking his head and muttering, her ego built on a foundation of lies, cracked slightly. "Excuse me, did you just critique me?" She stepped toward the edge of the stage, her heels clicking like bullets. "You think a janitor knows more about music than a Grammy winner?" The backup singers exchanged glances. The sound engineer looked nervous. Everyone in the room could feel the tension building like a storm. Marco said nothing, but his mind flashed back 5 years. He remembered when his stage name was the Phantom Singer, back when magazine covers called him the most promising opera voice of his generation. That was before the recording studio fire, before he ran back into the burning building to save 2 sound engineers trapped inside, before the smoke and heat destroyed his vocal cords, before his management company dropped him like yesterday's news, before his wife left him, before he lost his house, before he was forced to take any job that offered health insurance he desperately needed for his 6-year-old daughter, Leah. She was born deaf. The doctor said a cochlear implant surgery could give her the gift of hearing, $50,000, money he didn't have. That's why he mopped floors in the same theater where he once performed. The irony wasn't lost on him. Every night, he cleaned up after artists who couldn't carry a tune without digital help, while his own destroyed voice remained silent. He looked at Selena, still glaring down at him from her crystal-covered pedestal. She had everything he lost, but none of the talent he once possessed. "I'm sorry, Miss Vance," he said quietly, wringing his mop. "I'll be more careful." But as he walked away, Marco touched the tuning fork in his pocket, the one marked F1040. The last remnant of his musical past. He'd carried it every day for 5 years, like a broken compass that still pointed toward who he used to be. Selena watched him shuffle away in his torn uniform. Something about his quiet dignity bothered her. More than if he'd fought back in the pit of her stomach, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty. She grabbed the microphone again and belted out another high note, this time louder and more aggressive, but the auto-tune couldn't hide the slight tremor in her voice for just a moment. She wondered what it would sound like if all the machines were turned off. The thought terrified her. Selena's smile turned predatory. She'd built her career on crushing people smaller than herself, and this janitor had just given her the perfect opportunity. You know what? She tapped the microphone with one crystal-encrusted fingernail. "I don't think you're sorry at all. I think you're judging me, a janitor, judging a Grammy winner." The crew members stopped what they were doing. The sound engineer paused with his hand on the mixing board. Everyone sensed blood in the water. "Here's what's going to happen," Selena announced, her voice echoing through the speakers. "You're going to come up here and sing the exact note I just sang. If you can hit a perfect C6, which I doubt, I'll personally pay for the whatever medical bills you're struggling with. I saw your employee file. Marco, 50,000 for your daughter's surgery, right? Marco's blood ran cold, his throat constricted just thinking about singing in public again. But if you fail, Selena continued, you're fired immediately for disrupting a professional rehearsal. Security will escort you out, and you'll never work in this industry again, deal? The backup singers whispered among themselves. This was cruel even for Selena, but nobody dared intervene. Marco stood frozen. If he sang, he'd reveal his identity and risk destroying what little was left of his vocal cords. If he didn't, he'd lose his job, and Leah would never hear her father's voice. I'm waiting, Selena sang mockingly. With shaking legs, Marco walked toward the stage steps. Each footstep echoed like a death march. He climbed onto the platform where he'd once performed for thousands, now dressed in a janitor's uniform. Selena handed him the microphone like she was offering poison. Go ahead, superstar, show us what you got. Marco wrapped his fingers around the mic. His throat felt like sandpaper. 5 years of silence had left his vocal muscles weak and unpredictable. He opened his mouth and tried to produce sound. What came out was a strangled rasp, like air leaking from a broken balloon. The crew erupted in laughter. Oh my God, Selena giggled into her handheld mic. That's the sound my garbage disposal makes when it's broken. Humiliation burned through Marco's chest, but he thought of Leah's face when she tried to speak, with her hands desperately wanting to hear the words she couldn't say again. He croaked. This time he used his diaphragm breathing technique. He felt air flowing properly for the first time in years. He opened his mouth to sing when suddenly feedback screamed through the speakers. The sound engineer had deliberately cranked the gain, creating an ear-splitting loop that sent everyone covering their ears. Marco stumbled backward, clutching his head in pain. Oops, the engineer said, with a fake smile. Technical difficulty, Selena laughed harder. 2 strikes, 1 more, and you're out on the street where you belong. Marco was about to step down when he noticed something glinting in the stage lights. His phone had fallen out of his pocket during the feedback incident. The screen was lit up with his wallpaper, a photo of Leah wearing her old broken hearing aid, smiling despite living in silence. In that moment, Marco remembered why he'd survived the fire, why he'd sacrificed his career to save others, why he'd endured 5 years of shame and struggle. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out his most precious possession, a silver tuning fork marked a 440, the same fork he'd used during his conservatory days to find perfect pitch. Marco tapped the fork against the microphone stand. A pure, crystal-clear tone rang through the theater. The sound was so perfect, so mathematically precise, that it seemed to clean the air itself. The laughter stopped for the first time in 5 years. Marco felt his vocal cords remember their purpose. He didn't need their broken microphones or their sabotaged equipment. This theater had natural acoustics that money couldn't buy. He pushed the mic stand away from him and stood alone in the center of the stage. I don't need your machines, he said quietly, his voice carrying through the hall with unexpected power music. His mathematics sound is physics, and truth doesn't need amplification. Selena's smile faltered. Something in his tone had changed. The broken janitor was gone, replaced by someone who understood sound at a molecular level. Marco closed his eyes and remembered his daughter's face. He thought about her first word, which she'd signed, but never heard. He imagined the moment she would hear his voice for the first time after her surgery. He took the deepest breath of his life, engaging muscles he had thought were dead forever. His larynx positioned itself with muscle memory that 5 years couldn't erase. And then Marco sang the note that emerged. Wasn't just a C6. It was a perfect, unassisted, mathematically precise tone that filled every corner of the concert hall. No auto-tune, no digital enhancement, no tricks, just a human voice producing a frequency so pure that wine glasses in the VIP lounge began to vibrate. The sound technician's jaw dropped. The backup singers stopped breathing. Selena's face went white as she realized what she was hearing. This wasn't just good singing. This was the kind of voice that came along once in a generation. The kind of voice that made everything else sound like amateur hour. Marco held the note for 15 seconds that felt like eternity, then let it fade into perfect silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Selena's microphone hitting the floor. The silence stretched like a held breath. 500 empty seats seemed to lean forward, waiting. Even the air conditioning had stopped humming as if the building itself was listening. Marco stood alone in the spotlight, still holding the tuning fork. Its silver surface caught the light like a beacon. He knew what he had to do, and he knew the cost. Singing a full operatic C6 with damaged vocal cords was like asking a broken violin to play a perfect symphony. One wrong move, one too much pressure, and his voice would shatter permanently. The scar tissue from the fire had already taken so much this could take everything that remained. But as he looked out into the empty theater, he saw Leah's face in every seat. Her curious eyes when she watched his lips move but couldn't hear the words. Her patient smile when she tried to teach him sign language. Her trust that Daddy would somehow make everything better. He closed his eyes and made his choice. The human voice is a miracle of engineering. Air from the lungs becomes pressure, becomes vibration. Vibration becomes beauty, but only if every component works in perfect harmony. Marco placed his feet shoulder-width apart and activated his core muscles. He felt his diaphragm drop like a piston, creating a vacuum that drew air deep into his lower lungs. This was a Poggio technique, the foundation that separated amateur singers from masters. The breath was just the beginning. He lifted his soft palate, creating a cathedral of space in his mouth and throat. His larynx settled into the exact position it had learned 20 years ago in conservatory muscle memory, overriding 5 years of silence. Selena watched from the side of the stage, her face a mixture of curiosity and terror. She'd never seen anyone prepared to sing like this. Her own technique consisted of standing pretty and letting the machines do the work. The backup singers had stopped whispering. The sound engineer's hand hovered over his controls, unsure whether to help or sabotage. Marco opened his mouth and began the first note emerge like sunrise quiet, then growing, then blazing. It wasn't the raspy croak from his earlier attempts. This was a liquid gold made of sound waves, each vibration precisely calibrated. He built the note layer by layer, adding harmonics that only a master craftsman could control. The sound had what Italians called squillo, that brilliant penetrating quality that allowed opera singers to be heard over full orchestras without microphones. As he climbed toward the high C, something magical happened in the theater's acoustics. The dome ceiling, designed by architects who understood how sound waves behave, caught his voice and amplified it naturally. Every surface became a speaker. Every wall became an instrument. The frequency climbed to 4 at 440, Hertz B4 at 4, 93, C5 at 523. Each note perfect, mathematical, unforced, but Marco wasn't finished climbing C6, the money note, the killer frequency. The sound that separated gods from mortals required 1046.5. Hertz of pure sustained perfection. Most pop singers couldn't dream of reaching it. Most trained singers couldn't hold it for more than a few seconds. Marco hit it and owned it. The note exploded through the theater like controlled lightning. It bounced off the back wall and returned as an echo that harmonized with itself. Crystal champagne glasses in the VIP booth began to sing in sympathy, their rims vibrating at the exact frequency of his voice. A security guard in the lobby stopped mid-step, hearing something impossible through the 3 sets of closed doors. The janitor's cart in the hallway rattled as sound waves passed through its metal frame. In the lighting booth, a technician grabbed his frequency analyzer and watched in disbelief as the digital display confirmed what his ears already knew. Perfect pitch zero deviation, sustained power that defied physics. Selena's face had gone from white to gray. She knew she was witnessing something that would end her career if it ever got out. This wasn't just good singing, this was proof that everything she represented was a lie. 15 seconds 2025, Marco held the note like he was holding his daughter's future in his voice. Every cell in his body focused on this single moment, this one perfect frequency that could change everything. The note began to crescendo. Not louder in volume, but richer in harmonics, overtones that trained ears could hear. But untrained minds could only feel the kind of complexity that no computer could replicate. No auto-tune could improve. 30 seconds, an elderly man in an expensive suit stood up in the VIP section. He'd been sitting quietly through Selena's rehearsal, but this was different. This demanded respect. This demanded recognition. Bravo. The old man shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Bel canto, true bel canto. His words broke the spell. Applause erupted like a dam, bursting. The backup singers were crying. The sound engineer had abandoned his sabotage plans and was recording everything on his phone. But the most telling reaction came from Selena herself. She had dropped to her knees at the side of the stage, her crystal gown pooling around her like broken dreams. For the first time in her career, she was face to face with actual talent, and the comparison was devastating. Marco let the note fade slowly like a sunset that knew its beauty couldn't last forever. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. This was reverent, sacred. He opened his eyes and saw the old man pushing through the VIP section, walking quickly toward the stage. The man's face was familiar, but Marco couldn't place it through the haze of exhaustion and adrenaline. Young man, the stranger called out as he approached the stage steps. Do you have any idea what you just did? Marco touched his throat gently. He could feel the swelling already beginning. His vocal cords had given everything they had left. This might have been his last song, but it was worth it. I sang for my daughter. He replied simply. The old man reached the stage and extended his hand. I'm Maestro Chen. I've been conducting opera for 40 years, and what you just did, that was the most beautiful C6 I've heard since Pavarotti himself. Selena's microphone, still lying on the floor where she dropped it, caught every word and broadcast it through the theater speakers. The sound of her career ending was a lot quieter than Marco's song. The video hit the internet before Marco even made it home. That night, someone in the crew had recorded everything on their phone, 30 seconds of a janitor in a stained uniform, producing the most beautiful sound anyone had heard in years. The caption read, Janitor destroys famous singer with one note by midnight. It had 1 million views by morning. Nova Records lawyers were already moving. Marco woke up to pounding on his apartment door through the peephole. He saw a woman in a $1,000 suit, holding a leather briefcase. Behind her stood a man built like a refrigerator, wearing sunglasses indoors. Mr. Marco Rivera. The woman's voice was sharp as broken glass. I'm Amanda Cross from Hartwell Barnes and Associates. We represent Nova Records and Miss Selena Vance. We need to talk, Mr. Rivera. You're in serious legal trouble. Amanda pulled out a tablet and showed him a cease and desist order, violation of copyright law, intentional interference with business relations fraud, and conspiracy to damage our client's reputation. We're prepared to seek $5 million in damages. Marco laughed despite himself. $5 million, lady. I make $12 an hour mopping floors. You might as well sue a homeless man for the moon. That's where you're wrong. Amanda's smile was predatory. We've done our research. You're not just some janitor, are you? You're Marco Rivera, formerly known as the Phantom Singer, the vocalist who vanished. After the Columbia Studios fire, his blood ran cold. They knew exactly who he was. Here's what we think happened. Amanda continued, you've been planning this for months, hiding your identity, getting close to Miss Vance, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate her. On camera, this was a calculated attack designed to destroy her career and resurrect your own. That's insane. Is it a washed-up opera singer with a sick child and mounting medical bills? A man who lost everything and needed revenge. The story writes itself. Mr. Rivera and juries love a good story. The refrigerator man stepped closer, especially when that story explains how you used hidden electronic devices to amplify and modify your voice. Auto-tune isn't just for studios anymore. Portable vocal enhancement technology is readily available. Marco stared at them. You want to claim I was lip-syncing while accusing your client of the same thing. We're claiming you used illegal devices to create a fraudulent performance designed to embarrass Miss Vance, and we have expert witnesses ready to testify that such technology exists and was likely used. Amanda opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick contract. However, Nova Records believes in second chances. We're prepared to offer you a way out of this mess. She set a cashier's check on the hallway table. The amount made Marco's knees weak, $200,000 more than enough for your daughter's surgery and a fresh start somewhere else. Amanda said softly, "All you have to do is sign this statement admitting that you used electronic enhancement devices during your performance, a simple apology to Miss Vance for the misunderstanding, and this all goes away." Marco picked up the check, $200,000 more money than he'd seen in 5 years, combined. Leah's surgery, a new apartment, maybe even a chance to start over. In a city where nobody knew his story, all he had to do was lie. There's one more thing, Amanda added. The statement includes a non-disclosure agreement. You'll never be able to discuss what really happened that night, and you'll be permanently banned from any professional singing venues. But honestly, Mr. Rivera, look around. How much lower can you fall? She gestured at his cramped apartment with its peeling paint and broken air conditioner. Your daughter deserves better than this. She deserves to hear the silence stretch between them like a chasm in her bedroom. Leah stirred, but didn't wake. Through the thin walls. He could hear his neighbors starting their day, preparing for jobs that barely paid enough to survive. This check represented everything. He'd lost security, hope, a future for his little girl. But as he stared at the money, Marco thought about something else. He thought about the moment Leah would be old enough to ask about her father's career, when she'd want to know why he'd stopped singing, when she discovered the videos and news articles about the night her daddy chose between truth and money. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. When she finally heard his voice for the first time, would she hear the voice of someone who stood up for what was right, or someone who sold his integrity for a pile of cash? Marco looked up at Amanda's expectant face. Her pen was already out, ready for his signature. You know what? He picked up the check and held it for a moment longer. Then he tore it in half. My voice might be broken, but my daughter's going to grow up knowing her father never lied for money. He handed the pieces back to Amanda. Get out of my home. Amanda's face flushed red. You're making a huge mistake, Mr. Rivera. We'll destroy you in court. Maybe Marco started to close the door, but you'll have to do it honestly. And something tells me that's not really your specialty. The door clicked shut, leaving lawyers standing in the hallway with their briefcase full of lies and their torn-up check inside the apartment. Leah was awake, signing, "Good morning, Daddy," with her small hands. Marco signed back, "Good morning, baby girl. Daddy loves you," for the first time in 5 years. He meant every word. Completely 3 days later, Nova Records called a press conference. Selena stood behind a podium in the same crystal dress, flanked by lawyers and PR specialists. The plan was simple: destroy Marco Rivera's credibility before he could destroy hers, ladies and gentlemen. Selena began, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. I'm here to address the malicious lies being spread about my performance abilities by a disgruntled former employee. The reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing. This was exactly the kind of celebrity scandal that sold newspapers. Mr. Marco Rivera, who was fired from our venue for inappropriate behavior, used sophisticated electronic devices to create a fraudulent performance designed to... That's enough. The voice came from the back of the room. An elderly woman in a simple black dress walked slowly toward the front, her cane tapping against the marble floor. She was small and unassuming, but every person in the room turned to watch her approach. Excuse me, ma'am. Selena's publicist stepped forward. This is a private press conference. The old woman smiled gently and pulled out a badge. Elena Vasquez, songwriter. I wrote the song you were butchering that night, dear. The room erupted. Elena Vasquez was a legend. She'd written hits for 3 generations of artists, but had always remained mysteriously out of the spotlight. Nobody had seen her in public for over a decade. Selena's face went white. Mrs. Vasquez, this is about a completely different matter. Oh, I think it's exactly about matter. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. You see, I was in the VIP section that night. I recorded everything, both performances. She pressed play first came. Selena's voice clearly processed through multiple layers of auto-tune and pitch correction. The digital artifacts were obvious when isolated from the backing track. Then came Marco's voice, pure and unassisted, mathematically perfect. I've been recording vocals for 50 years, Elena announced to the stunned crowd. I know the difference between a human voice and a computer, Miss Vance. You couldn't hit that note if your life depended on it. But Mr. Rivera, she smiled. That man has a gift from God. The press conference devolved into chaos. Reporters shouted. Questions, cameras flashed frantically. Selena's lawyers huddled in panicked whispers within hours. Nova Records had terminated Selena's contract. Within days, a children's charity had reached out to Marco, offering to pay for Leah's surgery in full. They'd been moved by his story of choosing integrity over money. 1 year later, Marco stood in front of a restored brownstone in the Arts District. The sign above the door read, The Tuning Fork Academy, free music education for all children inside 20 kids from the neighborhood. Practice scales on donated instruments. Some came from families who could never afford music lessons. Others, like Leah, had physical challenges that traditional schools couldn't accommodate. Marco walked to the old upright piano in the corner. Leah sat beside him on the bench, her new cochlear implants gleaming softly behind her ears. For the first time in her life, she could hear music ready. Marco asked, his voice still rough, but healing. Leah nodded and placed her small fingers on the keys together. They struck a single perfect note. The sound filled the room where broken dreams came to heal. As the note faded, Leah looked up at her father with wonder in her eyes. Daddy, she said, her voice clear and strong, it sounds just like you told me it would. Marco wrapped his arms around his daughter and smiled. Some victories were worth more than any amount of money. Some songs were worth singing, even if they cost you everything. The tuning fork in his pocket hummed quietly. Still perfectly calibrated after all these years, still pointing toward truth. The entertainment world teaches us that everything can be fixed with technology, faces, voices, and even character. We worship idols standing on high pedestals surrounded by machines and massive teams, forgetting that music's true beauty comes from raw authenticity. Marco, the janitor, in his stained uniform, proved that genuine talent is like a pure sound frequency. It needs no filters, no enhancement, and certainly cannot be bought when you sing with your entire soul and integrity. That sound has the power to pierce through any wall of deception. No matter how well constructed, never be ashamed of your humble beginnings. Be ashamed only if you stand at the top while your feet don't touch the ground. Remember that a wrong note can be fixed by computers, but a wrong life cannot be saved by any technology. Live authentically, sing truthfully. Let your life be a symphony of kindness in a world full of auto-tune. Be the voice that needs no enhancement to move hearts and change lives. The most beautiful sound in this world isn't perfect pitch. It's the sound of someone choosing truth over convenience, integrity over profit, and love over fear. That frequency will always find its way to the hearts that need to hear it most. If you believe that truth is still the most beautiful sound in this world, hit the subscribe button to join our community. Here we tell stories about the silent heroes of everyday life. We'll see you again soon. Time = 2 Center.